Right. Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Hewitt-Biggs. I'm the director of the Global Network here at the British Council, and I'm really delighted to welcome you today to today's event. And the event is what is the role of culture and education in increasing the UK's global influence? So, as I'm sure you'll all agree, a fascinating topic. And we've got a really brilliant lineup of speakers today. They're going to share a few brief opening remarks shortly, and then we're going to open up to questions and discussions. So please do start sending your questions in to the panel using the Q&A function, and we will get started. Please also join the conversation on Twitter by tagging #InsightBritish and using the #SoftPower icon. So please do that, because we really want to get a good discussion going. So today we're exploring the role that education and culture play in increasing the UK's global influence. As many of you will know, this autumn the UK government's integrated review into defence, foreign policy, development and aid will conclude. And this is really a major review which will shape the UK's foreign policy strategy for the years ahead. We at the British Council believe that connections built through education, through culture and English language can enable a favourable environment for the UK's foreign policy to be received. Lots of research that we've done shows that cultural relations activity builds trust, and more trust translates to more people choosing to do business with, to visit and study in the UK. In fact, the British Council's recent perception survey with Ipsos Mori of almost 40,000 people across 36 countries found that the UK has in fact risen in the ranking to be the most attractive country in the G20 in 2020. The UK ranks second for the world leading arts and culture, joint second for fosters creativity, and second for world leading universities. So pretty good position. And overall, attractiveness of the UK for people who've participated in cultural relations activity is 16% higher than those who haven't. So, I mean, that is really quite significant. However, I think, as we all recognise, the UK's leading position is fragile, with other nations close behind in international influence. In 2018, the UK was first in 9 of the 20 soft power qualities used in the study, but now only first for 1, while Germany is first in 9. So there's a lot of work to be done, which is why I'm really delighted to welcome the following contributors to this debate tonight, who can help answer some of the questions about how can we maintain this. So first of all, we've got the Right Honourable John Whittingdale, OBE, MP, Minister for Media and Data at the Department for DCMS, Digital Media, Culture and Sports. And John was elected the MP for Malden in 1992 and has been Minister of State in the Department for DCMS since February 2020, I believe is right. Next, we've got Ryan Henson, who is the CEO of the Coalition for Global Prosperity. The Coalition for Global Prosperity brings together political, military, business and faith leaders who believe that an effective development budget, alongside an active diplomatic and defence strategy, keeps Britain at the forefront of saving lives, alleviating poverty and bringing freedom, security and prosperity to those who need it most. So welcome to you both. We've also got Shona McCarthy, who's the Chief Executive of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. And Shona the Edinburgh Festival Fringe is the largest art festival in the world. From 2011 to 2014, Shona was the Chief Executive of the Culture Company, leading on Londonderry's transformational year as the UK City of Culture. And finally, we welcome Imran Ahmed Khan, MP, and he is the chair of the APPG for Foreign Policy. And Imran is the Member of Parliament for Wakefield. He's the chair of the recently established APPG for Foreign Policy. And before entering Parliament, Imran worked for the United Nations as a Special Assistant for Political Affairs in Mogadishu. So what a panel we've got. Fantastic. Thank you for your time and welcome. So first of all, I'm going to invite you, Minister Whittingdale, to share your opening remarks, and then we're going to put a few questions to you. So welcome and thank you.
Well, thanks, Kate, and thank you to the British Council for organising this afternoon's session. I think it's incredibly topical. This is a time of huge challenges, but also great opportunities. And I've always been a very strong believer in the importance of soft power. And the British Council has done a great job, firstly, in highlighting the influence that soft power can bring, but also actually being a manifestation, if you like, of UK soft power in itself. And I make a point that when I visit countries, I always try and talk to the British Council representatives. As you've set out, the UK does have a very strong record in this area. We've always been right at the top of the ranking. Number one, number two, it moves around a little bit, but it is something where we have a number of huge advantages and we should take advantage of that. And you refer to the integrated review which is taking place, and I very much believe that soft power is as important, if not more important, than hard power, and that is, I hope, something which will be reflected. Now, these are extraordinary times. Obviously, the world is coping with the pandemic, and that is an area where I think the UK has an opportunity to demonstrate leadership, both in terms of science, where we are ahead of most countries in developing potential treatments and vaccines. Science is, again, one of the strengths of the UK. My own area for which I'm responsible is data, and tackling the pandemic has involved sharing of data, and one of the areas which I'm very keen, which the UK again should provide leadership, is in both the greater utilisation of data, but alongside that, ensuring that civil liberties are respected, privacy, and that is something where I think we do have the opportunity to provide leadership. Then at the same time as we are tackling the pandemic, obviously we're reaching the end of the transition period, after which Britain will sort of break loose from the European Union rules that have governed us until now. And that, I think, will give us an opportunity. I've always believed that the UK should become more outward looking, that we should look beyond the shores of the European Union and seek to raise our influence and do business in as wide an area as possible. And soft power helps us with that. Now, as I said, we have a huge number of strengths in this area. I've always believed perhaps the best strength we have, which the British Council helps to propagate, is the English language. Something like 2 billion people speak English around the world. It is the second language of almost every country in the world. And that means that not only does that help us to interrelate with them, to do business with them, to influence them, but also the other topic which is in your title today is education. And British universities are in the top ranking, and obviously we managed to attract students from across the world to come and learn at British universities and also at British schools, and many of them have also established their own satellites, if you like, in different countries. So it's a two-way traffic. But I visit countries and have time and again found that leaders of nations or MPs that I've spoken to, either they've been educated in Britain or they've had children who are being educated in Britain, and that, I think, gives us an enormous strength. And then some of the traditions, the values that this country holds dear. Democracy, we are one of the oldest democracies in the world. Our rule of law dates back to 1215 and Magna Carta, and those are things where particularly those countries that have more recently arrived at democratic government and establishing the rule of law, we can help them do that through the programs that the Department of International Development and Foreign Office run, through the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, through Chevening scholarships. So those, I think, are great strengths which people do appreciate the help that we can give. Then in my own area, I cover media, and one of the most effective instruments we have is the BBC World Service. The latest figures show the BBC reach something like 468 million people every week, and they are regarded as #1 in the world for trust, for independence, for reliability. The competition in that area is not always strong. If you look at people like Russia Today and CGTN, they do not have the same reputation and respect that the BBC enjoy. But it does mean that we can use that, particularly in this area of combating fake news, misinformation, which has become especially important as we deal with the pandemic and some of the misleading information that's being put around. And then I've also been very involved with the campaign for media freedom. I've actually worked with the Coalition for Global Prosperity, I think at a conference meeting we had on media freedom. And of course, we had the conference in London in 2019, where we launched the campaign, and that is continuing. And we have a division in the Foreign Office that is seeking to promote media freedom. And it is particularly relevant because sadly there are a lot of countries where journalists are still under threat. Many are in prison, sometimes even sadly are killed in the course of their duties. So there is still a lot of work to do, but that is something which the UK is leading on, particularly alongside Canada, who are our partners in that campaign. And I am this country, because I'm conscious that we need to look after our own journalists as much as protect them overseas. So I chair the new committee for the protection of journalists here. Obviously, our creative industries, again, a DCMS responsibility, hugely successful in every area. The Premier League, probably the most successful league in the world. Film and TV production, you know, we've currently got Jurassic World, we've got Batman, we've got Star Wars, we've got Mission Impossible, all being made in the UK at the moment. Our music artists regularly top the charts around the world, electronic games. So these are things which aren't necessarily the result of government intervention. It is something that the UK is extraordinarily good at, and all helps to project the UK around the world. So, I mean, I do think these are things we can take advantage of. We also have some opportunities for leadership coming up. We will be hosting, obviously, COP26, where we will be making the focus on the need to address climate change. The UK will be chairing the Digital Nations Group, looking at technology, artificial intelligence, data, and establishing rules for the adoption of those technologies. And then we're looking forward to the presidency of the G7 in 2021. So in all these areas, I think the UK has a very strong voice, and we have a number of opportunities coming up which will allow us to exert that influence. So I do think soft power is something which we have a massive strength in, and where we can use that to benefit of our own citizens, but also in many other countries where we can help them develop and to tackle some of the huge challenges which confront us today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Minister. Some really, really interesting stuff in there. So just a sort of first question, thinking about, you know, the UK's position as first amongst equals for international influence with other countries, you know, including now Canada, the US, Japan, Germany, China, of course, in the future, and now. And so I was wondering, you know, how do you think that DCMS and wider UK government can really really effectively use the UK's soft power assets to maintain this leading role? You know, how you talked about that, you know, government alone can't do that. So how in your view, can you use those assets most effectively?
Well, I mean, I think it's a combination of things, and to some extent, it's not a competition. I mean, if other countries are strong in these areas, that's something to welcome, and I want to work with them. I mean, I referred to the campaign that we are jointly running with the Canadians on media freedom. But as I said, we do have an extraordinary strength in the English language, which allows us to reach many more people. And, you know, the BBC World Service, which I have a particular sort of passion to support, because I do think it's an enormously respected and powerful medium, which no other country really can match in that way. So, I mean, I don't think, I'm not going to lose sleep because perhaps France is number one and we're number two. I want us to remain right up the top, but I also want us to work with our partners. And I'm hoping to go to Italy to develop our bilateral relations later this week, which will be particularly around culture. So I think, I'm looking to build as many alliances as possible.
Fantastic. And you mentioned early on that there were some opportunities for our global influence following the departure from the European Union. Could you say a little bit more about what you think those opportunities and challenges are looking forward?
Well, I mean, I think there are those who thought that leaving the EU meant Britain sort of looking in on itself. It was an inward. I've always taken the opposite view. Obviously, we want to maintain very close relations with our partners in Europe, but actually we want to look beyond that. And we have historic advantages. We have the Commonwealth. We are, as I say, about to assume the presidency of the G7. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for global leadership. The Digital Nations Group, which is a collection of countries, all of which are quite far advanced in the use of digital technology, and we're going to be chairing that in the coming year, and of course COP26, and that is a global challenge. So I'm keen that we still maintain, our bilateral relations and our relations with the EU and work closely with the EU. But I do think that we now need and can address these issues on a global scale.
Yes, brilliant. And lastly, what do you think the role of the creative industries can play in countering? You talked earlier about disinformation and misinformation campaigns. What do you think the role of the creative industries are in that area?
Well, I mean, obviously, particularly the media have a huge role to play. And one of the great assets we have, as I said, is the reputation and trust which the BBC enjoy. And generally, I've always felt that the best way to counter fake news is to establish places where people can go and be relatively assured that what they are viewing or reading or listening to is based on objective fact. It's been properly checked. It's by reputable professional journalists, and that applies in newspapers. It applies on TV and radio, and also online. But obviously, the online media are becoming more influential, and so we are obviously at the moment in talks with the platforms, particularly people like Google and Facebook, to try and get them to do more to counter misinformation, particularly around, for instance, vaccines for COVID-19 and some of the incorrect information put around. Early on in the pandemic, we were confronting widespread propagation of this myth that somehow it was all linked to mobile telephony. And people did believe that. And so we worked with the platforms to have it removed, but also to get across the facts and the scientific evidence, which demonstrated it was completely untrue.
Fantastic. And lastly, before we let you go and ask other panelists to say a few words, how can organisations such as the British Council, but others represented here, continue to support the UK government and increase our global influence? What's the best thing that we can be doing?
Well, I mean, the British Council obviously have a presence in many countries around the world and are doing a terrific job both in encouraging people to learn about the UK, to learn to speak English, and also to provide opportunities for UK culture. That's why I've always felt the British Council is one of our great strengths. I mean, our creative industries are hugely successful without government actually needing to promote them. The fact that British music artists are known around the world is not due to the government. It's due to the sheer talent which we happen to have in the UK. We can help them to reach those audiences, but we are very fortunate that the UK is very strong in these areas.
Yes, and I think when we do our research shows that one interaction with that kind of talent, etc., will massively increase people's propensity to come and study, to trade, etc. So, on that note, I'm going to thank you very, very much, Minister, for your words, and I'm going to hand over now to, and I hope that you're going to stay with us for a little bit longer and we can put some more questions to you. But I'm going to now invite Ryan to say a few words from, again, Ryan's from the Coalition for Global Prosperity. Would you like to share your opening statements, Ryan?
Sure, yes. Thank you very much, Kate, and thank you, Minister, for getting us off to a really good start. And hello to everyone watching at home. Thanks for tuning in. It's a pleasure to be partnering with the British Council this afternoon. I come at this from a very straightforward angle. I believe that Britain is at its best when it acts as a global leader, and that's what we campaign for at the Coalition for Global Prosperity. Now, there are two reasons for this. First, I think we're good at it. I think if you look at the last century, our historic role in fighting tyranny, and more importantly, or as importantly, helping to shape the many institutions that came afterwards, shows that we have an important role to play in the future. And second, I think the UK is uniquely placed to have a positive impact on world affairs. We're members of the G7, members of the Commonwealth. We have a seat on the Security Council. Leading members of NATO, strong ties to the US and to the EU, even with Brexit, and we are an international development superpower, and I'll say a word or two about that in a bit. So what are the big challenges facing the UK's global influence in the coming years? Well, I think number one, the geopolitical landscape is changing. Whether it's Trump or Biden, the trend in American politics is to be more sceptical of overseas entanglements, and more focused on domestic concerns, be it healthcare or immigration. Number two, I think we're seeing more nationalism, less multilateralism. And I think with that comes a real challenge to the rules-based order. And number three, we're seeing ambitious authoritarian powers seek to fill the vacuum. And this isn't the place to sort of pass moral judgment, but I think we can say that the likes of China and Russia have a very different vision for how the world should look. And I don't think it aligns with ours. So if our institutions are continued to be challenged, if you like, if the US continues to step back, then our ability to project our values and our influence also diminishes. And those that replace them may not be to our liking. So what can our soft power assets do to address this trend? Well, I think it goes without saying that they are absolutely integral to ensuring that our influence continues. And I think it's right that our influence should continue. And we know from the work we do at the Coalition that there have been dozens of meetings at the UN where the room has spontaneously erupted into applause at the mere mention of Britain's 0.7% overseas aid commitment. It generates enormous goodwill. I mean, I believe it's the morally right thing to do, and that in and of itself is good enough, but it's in our own interest too, because of the enormous goodwill that it generates. And as the UK redefines its role in the world, I think we have an incredible opportunity to consider what sort of nation we want to be. I said at the beginning, I believe this country is a force for good. I think we should continue to be a force for good. And I think our overseas aid budget is a fantastic example of Britain at its best. It demonstrates our integrity, our compassion to others, our leadership on tackling some of the greatest challenges of our time, be it climate change, poverty, widening opportunity. And I think it should be an absolutely central part of our soft power arsenal in the years to come.
Great, thank you very, very much for that, Ryan. And please, everybody, do post questions, comments, etc., so that we can be posing them to our panelists as we go along. But now I'm going to ask you, Shona. Again, Shona's the Chief Executive of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. Would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Kate, and good to see everyone. Well, you know, the UK has long punched above its weight as a melting pot and springboard for global creative talent. Creativity, in my view, is what we're best at. It's what we're known for. Music and literature and ideas and writing and films and television and drama and art and storytelling and comedy, making people laugh. Our creative output articulates, I think, our best values, and has been exported all over the world, as we know only too well from our experience at the Edinburgh Fringe. Culture is worth nearly 33 billion to the UK economy. In 2018, the wider creative sector contributed over 111 billion in GVA and employed around 6% of the UK workforce. That's some 3 million workers. I'd like to give 3 quick examples from my own personal experience. When we delivered the cultural programme in Derry, Londonderry, for the first UK City of Culture, culture was the vehicle for a perception shift internally and externally. We were able to reposition the city's reputation in the world from a city of conflict to a city of culture. Creativity and culture, I believe, will be a vital part of our post-COVID healing process. The Edinburgh Festivals, many of you will know, were set up in the first place to assist in reconnection to Europe and healing after the horrors of the Second World War. The richness of our cultural engagement and output will be vital in rebuilding a collective confidence, attractiveness and empathy with our global neighbours emerging from COVID. In my time as head of the British Council in Northern Ireland, I saw this global network play a vital role, and it's loved for that. Collaboration, exchange, mutual learning and understanding, mobility and movement of artists and creatives can bridge, build and bring ongoing connection and understanding when politics or wider economics fail. And in my role now at the Edinburgh Fringe, I am continually astounded by the reach of and love for this connector and global brand for the UK, recognised the world over as a place of international exchange, openness, performing arts, import and export. Everyone is welcome. We enjoy permit-free status. And the Fringe as a concept, in fact, an innovation, was born in Edinburgh in 1947, giving a voice to those who were excluded, offering creative freedom of expression, an open platform through which anyone with a creative voice can perform. And yet now there are almost 300 Fringe festivals around the world who still look to Edinburgh as that original, that inspiration. We had 157 different nations represented at the Edinburgh Fringe in 2019. It is a key player in promoting the UK as a culturally open, creative, inclusive, industrious and diverse destination. It draws together some 31,000 artists and has an extraordinary history of launching the careers of writers and actors and directors and producers, designers, technicians, who then go on to fuel the UK's creative industries. In 2019, we welcomed over 1,600 arts industry professionals, including curators and programmers from a staggering 55 countries across the globe. And even as we made a swift transition in 2020 with COVID onto the digital platform, we had 2,500 sign-ups to look at, select and see work even in the online space. It's by far the largest international gathering of arts industry professionals anywhere in the world. The conversations and networks built, the collaborations formed, the co-commissions dreamed up and the co-productions that are signed off. It's extraordinary. It's where work and talent is selected to fill theatres and festivals and screens across the world. The UK has an enviable cultural infrastructure that provides this kind of platform. I'll give you a quote from a conference I spoke at in India last weekend, where one of the contributors said, "The majority of the successes and major connections that have shaped my career in the arts as a producer have been directly because of the Edinburgh Fringe. The ripple effect of every time I have been or brought shows there has lasted for years, going on decades." So as a final word, I guess my plea is for the ongoing mobility of creatives and creative industry workers, for continuous mutual exchange through import and export of live performing arts, and acceleration of our digital innovation as we emerge into a different future. This is a moment of opportunity. Our cultural output is world leading. It is our best foot to put forward. The world is shifting. And if we don't prioritise our culture and creativity, then other countries will absolutely take that slot. Thank you.
Great. Hear, hear, Strona. Thank you very, very much. And then before we move on to some questions, I'm going to ask Imran Khan. Again, he is the chair of the APPG for Foreign Policy. For your opening comments, Imran.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you and the British Council and recognise your vital work in raising awareness of soft power and the role of culture in international relations. Now, I know politicians are famous to have amongst their ranks more than our fair share of Philistines, yet I'm unembarrassed to admit that I am a lover of art and culture. In fact, I think Shona should be particularly commend me particularly when I can say that since 1997 I haven't missed a single Edinburgh Festival, and I'm talking about the whole 3 weeks, with the exception of 2009 when I was stuck in Kabul, and 2017 when I wasn't able to leave Mogadishu, which I think gives me a pink slip for those two. Now, in my time abroad, I have witnessed and employed the power of art and culture in saving lives and protecting communities. And I think it's often not understood the vital role, when employed correctly, that art and culture has in saving lives at the hard, pointy end of things. As I said, in my career abroad, I've utilized and employed poets and dancers, writers and artists, which have helped reassure and protect communities in Afghanistan, in Syria, around the place from extremists and violent extremism. Now, the beautiful thing about art, about culture, is it provides you with a moment or to think of quiet and perspective. Now, perspective is key. When one views an object and you go around it, you view it and it appears very, very differently from the perspective you take it from. And that reminds us, and it reminds all people who are provided with this connection with art and culture, that there is no actual monopoly on truth. There are many truths, and this is what's really very, very key, and why we must actually employ our great soft power abilities better. Now, when we look, and I think Ryan touched upon it, when we look upon those that are our adversaries, both non-state actors and increasingly state actors, who share a different worldview and who seem to do everything but violent conflict in their antagonistic ways to Britain and our allies, it appears that we have the deck of cards stacked against us. But I actually believe that we hold a trump card, and that trump card are our values, our belief and celebration of pluralism and diversity. And culture, our culture, above all other things, I believe, is the finest manifestation of our values. And we need to employ them better to tackle those that seek to undermine freedom, not just ours, but the freedom of populations that they wish to subjugate, whether state or non-state actors. Now, international relations is no longer the exclusive dominion of governments, of bilateral and multilateral relations, I'm sorry to say this, Minister, orchestrated from Whitehall or Washington or Beijing or elsewhere. People who have common interests, hobbies, professions, gamers, develop very close relationships, people they probably will never meet, closer relationships than their own neighbors. Now, this is a huge opportunity. As we recognize, little slowly, but as we begin to recognize the attacks against our way of life, we must actually engage in a new, robust, clear-headed, population-centric foreign policy. And clearly, our great cultural soft power assets need to be better understood and employed. And when we can think about mobilizing populations, because in order to achieve what we ourselves value most, and the British values that should lead Britain as we go forward in the world as an independent sovereign nation, that will should be our core values and beliefs, which are the rights of everyone to live, work and worship as they choose. And increasingly, whether it's in Minsk or Hong Kong, around the world, people are increasingly wishing to live, work and worship as they choose. And I do not take one moment to sympathize with people who say, oh no, these are our values. These are not values we should impose upon others. Because whether it has been in the Hindu Kush or Afghanistan or Congo, Syria, Somalia or elsewhere, I have never met someone, however humble their background, how impoverished their education, who doesn't want the same things that we want, which is essentially stability, the best for their children and opportunities. And if we then employ societies, if we employ our toolkit in order to advance everybody's rights everywhere to live, work and worship according to their wish, Britain becomes a champion for people everywhere. And so I believe, because I don't know how long I've gone over, I believe in short that we must recognize and clearly deploy, I'm not going to say weaponize because that'll upset a lot of people, but deploy our soft power assets, our cultural assets to advance freedom and British values around the world.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for those words, Imran. Really, really powerful. I know that the Minister needs to go to another meeting. Is there anything you want to say just before you go?
Well, just following up from what Imran was saying, I can't quite match him. I have been to the Edinburgh TV and International Festival, but not quite as often as he had. But when he was talking about the fact that he was in Mogadishu and in Iraq and some quite challenging places, one of the things which I wanted actually just to highlight, which is a UK government initiative where I think we are achieving some really good things, is through the British Council actually, is the Cultural Protection Fund, which was set up to help those countries which were conflict zones, particularly Syria and Iraq, but has been since extended. We were very active in Beirut following the dreadful explosion there, and also we'll be working with nations facing climate change. So, I mean, yes, Imran's absolutely right that a lot of this is not due to people sitting in Whitehall or government offices, but there are things that we can do, and that I think was just one other area I wanted to highlight, because I think that again is a UK strength where we are able to provide real help to countries facing these huge challenges.
Yes, absolutely, and it's a programme that we at the British Council, you know, really cherish very dearly because of the impact it has in, you know, some of the countries that actually the UK has limited influence through other forms of diplomacy, and therefore it's a real example of where soft power can kind of build bridges where other mechanisms are failing to do so. But there's a real thank you so much, Minister, for your time. I know you've got to go to something else, so thank you very much for your support for this and some really insightful words from you, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. There's one question that has come in that I wanted to ask now, because we talked a lot about, you know, other cultures and the UK's influence through soft power and the assets that we hold in education and culture on those cultures. But the question here is that our own culture is currently going through a period of intense self-questioning. So how does that impact on the way in which the UK arts and culture are shared internationally? So our own country going through a period of intense self-questioning. Shona, I'm going to go to you first, just to ask you your views on that.
Well, again, I think it's a very healthy process for a country to be exploring, to be looking at what is its own kind of cultural DNA. What does it mean to be from any of these nations right now? And I think the best people to kind of explore and come at that from different perspectives and different lenses is our artists and creatives. And I think it is that openness to kind of to asking who we are and what we're about that is one of the things that makes us attractive in the rest of the world.
Okay, and what about you, Ryan? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm not an arts and culture specialist, so I'll defer to Shona and to good people at the British Council on this. I think for me, you know, my area of sort of work is international development, and I come back to my remarks at the beginning. I think while it's not specifically arts and culture, although there are many aspects of development which work there, I think our development work is a act of sort of, it's not just an act of generosity because it's work that needs doing and it's in our interest. It's a smart thing to do as well as the right thing, but I think it generates enormous goodwill, and I would sort of, my instinct tells me that it's something that makes those conversations easier to facilitate, which is a bonus of it doing the right thing and being in our interest.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ryan. So just moving on and back to you, Imran, on picking up on some of the areas that you were talking about. Could you say a little bit more about what you think are the geopolitical opportunities for the UK in the future to deploy its educational and cultural assets, but also its development assets? Because as Ryan says, I think that is one of our real crown in the jewels in the UK. I think you're on mute,
I'm dreadful with technology, quite obviously. I actually think our recent history is marked with, in terms of employing soft power and countering the threats, both from state actors and non-state actors, that are just beneath warfare levels, has been dreadful. It's rueful. And by being poorly equipped to do so, we have left ourselves exposed. And we can't protect ourselves and advance our values by simply reacting. We've got to understand what we have in our arsenal in order to affect positive change around the world. And I honestly feel there is nothing better than our soft power, our culture, and our arts to do so. And when we've got Uyghurs in China, or women in certain Muslim majority countries who are denied their basic rights, we don't need to simply resort to tried and largely failed bilateral old-fashioned diplomacy. There is nothing wrong with us instigating, supporting, being a source of succor and support for people to advance their own inalienable rights to live, work and worship as they wish. And I will bore people to death by the continuous repeat of to live, work and worship as you wish, because frankly, I find that is my central mantra. I have never yet found a country where people are allowed, permitted, to live, work and worship as they wish that is not free. Nor have I found a country where people are inhibited or find threat or fear from living, working, worship as they wish, that can be a happy member of the international community that does not harbour pernicious elements that becomes a threat to itself and to others.
Imran. Ryan, just to come back to you on, you're obviously, very, very linked into the massive shifts in the geopolitics of the world and how international development plays such an integral part of that. What's your view on the kind of opportunities for all of our soft power assets? In the future, where do you think we should be, really focusing our attention?
Well, if I sort of pick the obvious challenge that we're facing, which is pandemics, this is an area that we specialise in, as a country. If you look at the good work that was undertaken by the Department for International Development before its merger, and work which I'm absolutely certain will be carried on by the new Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, this is something that we're good at. If you look at what the UK did in combating Ebola in Sierra Leone, I think the statistics around the number of additional children who have been immunised because of UK aid, it's something like 67 million. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And I think if there's a big challenge that the whole world is facing right now, which affects all of us, it's not just COVID, it's clearly pandemics going into the future. And we recognise now that we're not safe while our neighbours aren't safe. A virus in Rome is effectively a virus in Wakefield, for example. So I think this is a real strength that the UK can deploy going forwards, which will contribute to our soft power offering.
Great, fantastic. And Shona, I wanted to come to you to ask about, how can culture and education sectors help to build influence for all 4 nations of the UK? And I'm picking you on you because you come from one and you're based in another. So it's obvious, but I will come to others who ask the same question as well.
I think including all 4 nations and recognising the strengths of all 4 nations, whether it's the language issue in Wales or it's the dealing with a post-conflict society in Northern Ireland, or the sheer creativity of the festivals in Edinburgh in Scotland. I think there's huge strength across all 4, and I think all 4 nations and everyone that the extensive network I have across the cultural sector of the UK at the moment is taking so seriously the major issues of our time, which are around climate change, the green agenda, Black Lives Matter. I don't know any single organisation that is not really exploring its own raison d'etre at the moment and asking itself, how can it create systemic change to actually take on some of those major issues of our time? The British Council is a great example, I think, of inclusion of all 4 nations, and is probably one of the organisations that has done that best.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that in all that we do, we really try to, reflect the diversity of the UK, of its 4 nations. I mean, Imran, from your perspective, is there more that we should be doing to use these sectors to show the influence of all of our 4 nations internationally?
One day I'll get it. I'm less concerned about the 4 nations than I am the United Kingdom. I'm unashamedly a unionist, but also I come to this from a slightly different perspective. My late father was born on the northwest frontier of British India. My mother was a Yorkshire woman from a long line of Methodist preachers, and all my siblings were born in Edinburgh. I was, by the grace of God, born in Yorkshire because my mother at least wanted one son who could play cricket for the county. She was terribly disappointed, I'm sure. But what I believe, so I identify not as English, not as anything but British. And being British is my DNA. The phrase I think was used earlier by Shona, I think, about our DNA. Now I say that DNA, what we are, is, and what we are understood to be around the world as Britons, is our adherence and belief and affection for the rule of law, fair play, and pluralism. And that, to me, is far more important than any associated Englishness, Scottishness, Irishness, Welshness, or even, a denizen of God's own country, Yorkshire. Now, in terms of what we can do to project this around the world, I honestly do believe it's about not just sitting on our laurels and saying, oh, we're the biggest spoken language and second language around the world and so on and so forth, but it's recognizing what that does in order to enter people's hearts, change behaviors, and for them to wish to live in ways similar to the way we do, and so on. Remember, the Great British Enlightenment, of which Edinburgh had more than its fair a role in the creation of, is what inspired the American revolutionaries. And those British Enlightenment values have, I would argue, become global, universal values. And I don't think we should be hesitant at all in upholding them and proclaiming those. Your very earliest question you asked about British culture being under a reevaluation and so on, I thought that was very, very interesting, because to be entirely honest, I think there's nothing but pride to be had in British history and culture, because we're talking about things, even the unsavory things that happened quite some time ago, and it shows us where we have gone to and where we are today, and the repudiation of the dark and accepting the light, and that in itself, I think, is an uplifting journey that gives hope to people who don't necessarily live in the enlightened situation that we presently do, and that a journey is a constant progression.
Fantastic. Shona, you've got your hand up to come in and answer that as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I do feel, as somebody from Northern Ireland who ran a city of culture and a city of dual identities on the northwest corner of one island that is part of the United Kingdom, one of the real strengths, I think, is in our ability to accept multiple identities and people's individual kind of right to identify themselves as Irish or British, or Irish and British, or Scottish and British, or I think that's kind of one of the strengths of the UK and the rest of the world, is its ability to promote and accept the duality of identity, or the multiplicity of identity that many of us have. Absolutely,
yes, I would agree with that, definitely. And just moving on to another question that's come in from one of the audience. This relates to global Britain. So the actual question is, how can UK education, culture, development and other soft power assets strengthen the global Britain agenda after the end of the transition period? So Ryan, I'm sure you've been involved in all the discussions around global Britain. What's your view on that?
Well, I think, to state the obvious, you get a very different answer about what global Britain means depending on who you speak to. Similar to the minister, I've always come at Brexit, which of course was the precursor to global Britain, from a very welcoming perspective. I saw it as an opportunity for us to engage more with the rest of the world, to shout about British achievements and British values, not to say we do everything best and we do everything better, but just to really put them front and center of everything we do on the global stage. And I think there's a real need for that, particularly as I said at the beginning, the United States and perhaps the EU are not as strong as they have been in the past. For me, again, I come back to aid and development as a key plank of that. I think in an age of complete mistrust, where we're rethinking alliances, where the traditional ties are perhaps not as strong as they were, I think to be able to demonstrate that this is something that the UK people, the British people, whether they're whichever part they're from, accept that we have a role to play in ensuring that the world's most vulnerable people are given a hand. It's not a huge amount that we give, but I think it's a fair amount. And I think as well, in terms of what that then looks like for global Britain, again, as I said before, for me that's enough. But I think if you are interested in ensuring that the UK remains competitive with rivals wherever they are, if you're interested in securing more trade deals, if you believe that our diplomatic assets and our fantastic defence services should be supported, then aid is absolutely integral to making sure that happens.
I was on mute then, apologies. Imran, from your perspective, the same question to you, how do we emerge from the end of the transition period using these assets to strengthen the global Britain agenda?
Well, I think that it's not just, it comes down again to my point earlier about perspective, and there's not a monopoly on truth and right. And I actually think that if we redouble our efforts to join forces and support other countries who are wishing to learn from us in employing soft power as a primary way to assert and support freedom around the world, it'll be a good thing. So what comes to mind is the other bookend to the Eurasian landmass, Japan. So Japan is increasingly finding out it can't combat or counter the threat of China in Africa and elsewhere. And so it's looking to Britain as a model of how to employ soft power throughout Africa. Now, I think that's a great opportunity. I think we should be working with our Japanese friends. I mean, right now the British Council is doing Midsummer Night's Dream, I believe, in Tokyo. But I think we should be working with our Japanese friends and encouraging them and helping them to assert Japanese culture and employing that and using that in order to further their interests in Africa and elsewhere. Because in the end, what unites Britain and Japan and Britain and all other countries, where the state doesn't do things to people but enables them, where this again it's a matter of the role of the state and the citizen and democracy and a belief in choice, we should be working together, because essentially the message of modern Japanese culture and modern British culture, and I would say the same for Australia and Canada and France and Germany, is actually just singing different lyrics to the same tune, and it'll further our interests against those negative ideologies and positions which wish, frankly, it might sound bleak, but wish to subjugate people's minds and hearts where we wish to liberate them. And I really do think there's an awful lot of cooperation, not just diplomatic and military, but actually in terms of soft power and sharing our best practice, and also improving our best practice as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So that kind of leads me to thinking about the future generation. So I think we're all, a lot of you are younger than me on this, but I think we all understand as internationalists the role that soft power makes around the world to making the UK more attractive. But what power does encouraging young people across the UK to have international experiences have for that global influence for the UK? And what do you think we could be done to encourage more young people to have international opportunities? I don't know about you, but I certainly, the young people that I talk to, my daughter's friends and generation, I don't feel quite the same appetite to seek the world out and to have the kind of opportunities that I just was desperate for at a young age. What do you think, Shona? What's the answer to that?
Oh, it is a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think young people are also very minded of their carbon footprint in 2020 as well. So the kind of desire for global travel is potentially marred by global pandemics and the desire to reduce carbon footprint. But I think we've still got a long way to go in terms of languages and the opportunities that young people have to do art and language together. For example, often they're having to make these kind of false choices even in the school setting. But yeah, internationalism, I think, and empathy and understanding between us and other countries is going to be absolutely essential to any young person growing up in this century or this millennium. So I think our festivals and our culture and our arts is always the place that I turn to, because we've had this permit-free status and we've had free movement of artists and creatives and creative workforces as well. I mean, last year when I did a poll of all of our seasonal staff at the Fringe, there were 17 different languages spoken across our team. So I'd love to see that continuous freedom of movement, and not just of our young people outwards, but also of young people inwards, because it's that mutuality actually and a level of humility when we're out in the world that I think is something that's going to be really important to the UK going forward. Not to be sort of too heavy-handed in how great we are and how amazing we are, but going out there with an absolute open heart and mind to the learning that we get from others and the mutuality of that.
No, absolutely. We find that very much in the programmes that we run at the British Council, in exchanges of young people, that humility and appetite for learning. And what about you, Ryan? I mean, what about young people engagement? Not just from the UK, but overseas as well. What's the future? What do we need to hope for?
Well, I think we're already seeing it to a large extent. Before I joined the coalition, I worked at CAFOD, one of the big international aid NGOs, and we sent a delegation to Poland for the COP. We went by coach, so we minimised our carbon footprint. It took absolutely hours and hours. Fortunately, I was back home minding the shop. But the point is, we sent a huge delegation of young people there, and they were visible. They certainly made their voices heard, and they strengthened the sort of more mature advocates, if you like, when they were then in the room with the negotiators. So I think young people have played a huge role, and I think they're continuing to. I think the obvious example while talking about climate change is Greta Thunberg. I'm not on the same page with all her arguments, but there's no denying that she inspires so many, and I think that's a fantastic thing, and we ought to see more of it. In terms of what more we can do going forwards, I think there's a role for leaders across the world to really empower young people. I think of Pope Francis is a good example of this. He perhaps doesn't have the electoral concerns of other leaders, perhaps, which makes it a bit easier. But I certainly think there's always more that we can do, and I think the Cabinet Office COP engagement team have been good on this. So there's hope.
Fantastic. And Imran, you and please add anything else at the end that you'd like to add before we finish off. You're on mute, Imran. Sorry.
I was feeling very envious of Pope Francis, and the idea of an election for life was just far too much for me to not dream of. But anyway, I actually think that what Shona was saying, and I think everybody repeated it, about the humility that comes from travel and international exposure is vitally important. But also, my constituency is 95.6% or thereabouts white working class British. And on my more deprived areas, it really does pain me when people lack hope and aspiration, and without aspiration there's no achievements, and if we have no achievements we have no history, it's past. But it's also because I believe at home our education system has let people down. It is not a political point of all stripes, it's simply not fit for purpose at the moment. And the way we learn, when in this phone I've got here there's more information probably in the Bodleian and the Library of Congress and the Library of Parliament put together, it's what matters are soft skills. And that's one of the great things that travel, international exposure, meeting people of different backgrounds, cultures, faiths really lends. And I am, for example, trying right now to set up the Wakefield Foundation, which is going to be allowing the young men and women who wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to go off to, Kenya and around the world and so on, to develop that appreciation and those soft skills, which is what really matters to get ahead in life and so on. But further to that point, the United States, I used to work for him. Ambassador Holbrooke was the head of the US Peace Corps. And I've always admired many of the positive intentions of the US Peace Corps. And I really do wonder, especially now, as we are, unfortunately likely to have increasing rates of unemployment, and especially youth unemployment and so on, whether something not massively dissimilar to a US Peace Corps type structure in the United Kingdom may be of huge benefit and may actually be very, very rewarding for young men and women going around exposing themselves and being exposed to others. And with our sense of other, we actually lose fear and we get confident, and we understand that general oneness that connects all people everywhere. But when we talk about our, I think Britain is uniquely served. It's one of our soft power assets. It's absolutely underemployed. It's wherever you go anywhere in the world, amid the middle of the cultural, financial, legal, and business community, you will find a disproportionate representation of compatriots of ours from these islands. And we don't employ them, we don't use them. And they are far, far better and more effective than virtually any arm of government I have ever met. And if we want to get things done, we should be getting them to canvass for us, lobby for us, push things for us. And that needs to be done. The idea that people after 4 years of living abroad lose their franchise is a lunacy. We need to be giving rewards to people to employ their access at the very top levels of government and society and systems for Britain. So there's many things that we're not doing particularly well, but this, when we identify one or two things, we realize actually how underexplored and underutilized soft power is, and what a huge strength to our collective national elbow it will be when we do actually sort our game out.
Absolutely. And on that note, I mean, we could go on and on all evening. I wanted to come to others to say more, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. But I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Shona, Ran and Imran for their time and their words of wisdom. And obviously for the British Council, this is our DNA. This is the kind of thing, you know, we could talk about forever and ever. But I did also want to end by thanking the British Council team that have been working on this, Sarah Giles and Callum Mulligan, who's on the call here, for all the work they put into this whole series. This is the fourth of a series of these events, and I think they've been a fantastic success, and we've really enjoyed talking to all of you who are out there and having such brilliant panelists as we've had today. So thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you in some sort of other iteration in the near future. All right, thanks everybody. Bye.